This episode is brought to you by QBD Books, bringing books to readers for 150 years.
Hi, I'm Sunny.
And I'm Allie, and
you're listening to Booksmart.
Booksmart is a podcast for readers who go absolutely feral for women's stories, book lovers with never-ending TBR stacks, and a crippling fear of falling behind in their annual Goodreads challenge.
If you want deliciously bookish discourse that's as silly as it is academic, then welcome. This is the podcast for you. So go on, get comfortable, make yourself a cuppa.
Or a hot chocolate.
And let's turn the page together.
Miss Sunny.
Miss ADK.
Well, that was very on theme for today. You're going a little bit lyrical?
A little bit lyrical, a little bit funky, a little bit soulful.
Very on theme for today's book club pick.
Welcome back to book club, y'all.
We did it. They said it
y'all.
couldn't be done.
They said it couldn't be done. We announced this book back at the end of our last podcast video, but somehow you stumbled into this episode blind. Welcome to our book club discussion on If I Ruled the World by Miss Amy DuBois Barnett. But before we dig deep into this, I know this has been like dominating our brain space almost entirely, but what else have you been reading?
Oof. My answer is really silly this month. It's
silly.
Let's do a silly one. So this month not even this month. So a couple months back, I moved into a new apartment, and in that process, I decided to go through all the boxes of old books I had in storage, and I found the It Girl series, which is a Gossip Girl spin-off series about Jenny Humphrey when she decided to go to boarding school, and it is truly one of the most meaningful book series in the world to me. I think there's like 12, 14 books, and they all have like a different colored heel on the spine.
That's classy.
It's amazing. Like, it was the first time I ever knew what, it's how I found out what ecstasy was through these books. Honestly, first chapter, I was like, wait, that's what ecstasy is. I was like 10-year-old reading these books about privileged not even high school, boarding school, privileged boarding school, 16, 17-year-olds. And these books shaped so much of my perception of like what my teen years would be when I was so much younger. And now I'm reading them again for the first time. I'm on the 5th one, lucky. And so that's what I've been reading. Highly recommend.
You're 26 right now. How much of your life has revolved around ecstasy?
Oh, famously, I'm like clearly such a drug person. Yes. I'm a party girl with a bad habit of drugs.
Habit of drugs. No, ecstasy. I do feel like your life has been dictated by the ecstasy of consuming a blind box. So it really depends on how you interpret the word ecstasy.
I've been clean since what? October?
Yeah, I think it was maybe even earlier than that. Me too,
September,
guys.
October was the last time that we did a blind box together.
If anyone wants some of my Sunny Angels, let me know.
If you want to pay us for our Sunny Angels.
Yeah. I spent too much money on those. That's the kind of ecstasy that's been in my life.
And
the ecstasy of a good book. Other than If I Ruled the World, I did dig deep into A Vow of Eternal Night, which was in the previous episode. We had the fabulous Lily, knocked our socks off as our first guest.
Literally, I don't have socks on right now. Neither does Sunny.
Yeah, we're sockless. Thank you so much, Lily, for that. And I just like, nom, 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 nom. Delicious. So that's what I'm still reading it.
I mean, you are a slut for a vampire.
I'm a slut for vampires.
Yes. Drink your blood.
I've come to suck your blood. Your blood.
Your minds are in the gutters.
Yeah. Grow up, guys. Anyway, growing up is something that happens a lot in If I Ruled the World.
If I Ruled the World, okay, so this was a book that I kind of pushed for it because I did a book like kind of like what books are coming out, like, little
you
article.
The web.
Yeah, back in like December, and I saw this and I think I put it as like the first thing on there because I read the description of being The Devil Wears Prada meets Empire. And I was so immediately sold, and I knew this had to be one of our book club picks of the month. It came out 28th of Jan, I believe. Mm-hmm. And it is only gaining more and more press. Like even today, as the day of filming, a new Harper's Bazaar article came out overnight as an interview with Amy. And we've got a Hulu series on the way, which, we are actually we're sat in the cinemas. Io Debris said it best.
Yeah, like they're asking me to leave. I'm already there. I'm camped out. The blurb fittingly says, get ready for an utterly immersive journey through one of the most dynamic eras in pop culture history. And I just couldn't think of a more fitting description of this book. It is so cinematic, is something that you and I sort of kept referring to it as.
It's a great book. I we won't give ratings yet, but it's like, I think you can tell based on our energy how we feel.
I actually, controversially,
it's going to be a better I think, well, I'm going to say I think it's going to be a better.
Oh, 100p.
It's a great book. It's going to be an even better series, I think.
100p. I was going to say controversially, I actually think we should hold our ratings to the end.
Oh, I agree.
Okay. Looking forward to being controversial.
Sunny wants to fight on camera, guys.
It's my love language, a bit of scrappy-doo. This book, the sales pitch of it, right, is that like it's obviously come in strong on the marketing with the Devil Wears Prada, Brown Sugar, Empire comparisons. I'm going to come out, this actually is my controversial moment, as somebody who like, I like Devil Wears Prada, but like I like it. Like that's kind of it. I will watch the sequel though. I love Anne Hathaway, love Meryl, love Mr. Tucci.
Love Caleb Heron.
What the hell does Caleb Heron have to do with Devil Wears Prada?
He's in the second.
No way.
Yeah, him. And like I think Simone Ashley's in it too.
Simone Ashley, yes, huge stan.
I'm like, that's what I'm sat for.
I did not know that Caleb Heron was in that. That did not come across my desk.
I'm so sorry for not putting it on your desk.
Rude.
With
if you want to chuckle, you need to follow Caleb Heron. I love
shout out
that
Caleb,
man.
come on the show.
Caleb.
My Caleb.
I meant to say shout out, but my Caleb. Yeah, Devil Wears Prada doesn't necessarily do it that much for me, but I grew up watching Empire. I feel like probably few of our listeners will have.
Bad taste if you didn't.
Yeah, truly. Shout out to Snitch Bitch, the great Terrence Howard, horrible man. Great portrayal of Lucius Lyon. Shout out to his performance of Snitch Bitch because that stays triple platinum in my house. It's really easy to see the comparisons here, but at the same time, this book is so specific, right?
It is so specific to a very, very intentional time, generation, and demographic. And it is like, so it really does feel like an all encapsulating world, from the references in like, you know, the music and the vibes of the town, but then also to the fashion. It is a very specific and intentional book that is definitely drawing on the experiences of the author, who was the first Black editor at a major publication in America, Black woman editor, and that was at Harper's Bazaar. Yeah,
I believe she was the deputy editor-in-chief, I want to say. But she has had she's such an impressive woman. I would love to get her on this podcast. I would love to have a conversation with her. She has really left her mark on so many huge mainstream, but also predominantly Black magazines in the States, magazines that really helped push culture, recognize and give flowers to the culture makers. And I think like this book is such a fierce love letter to Black women and women of color and men of color who really shaped like the prevailing culture of the late 90s, early 2000s. Like this book, so much of this book is about fashion, but it's also about hip hop. It's about hip hop. It's about streetwear and the intersection of all that and how that intersects then with politics.
Sociopolitical considerations,
100%.
Intersectional feminism. It's just
absolutely. I would describe this book as explosive, and not just because there's so much happening, but like it's stuffed. I'm surprised that I didn't put more tabs on it. But every single chapter is going to have throwbacks to rappers, to soul artists, or it will sort of imitate different figures that you can draw back and be like, oh, this has got to be a sort of an impersonation, an homage to XYZ person. Interestingly enough, I think I was really excited to approach this in our book club pick because it's set in New York. My family's from New York. I've been to New York. I've never had the privilege of living there. It's always been a dream. I think any girl that works in media has dreamed of working in a magazine in New York City. I still hope there's time to do that, even in this like
World War III.
Print is like simultaneously dying, but then also being resurrected by the girlies. The crafty girls. So who knows what the future holds? But it was just so fascinating to think of both the future and to reconcile the present while looking back at the past through the lens of somebody who was so instrumental in the success of magazines back then. So I immediately, it was sort of a natural pick, right? We're both media girlies. We both love magazines, obviously interested in Devil Wears Prada, Empire. I love hearing about Black women in media, Black trailblazers, of which there are so many. And so I immediately felt sort of a kindred connection to that. But then interestingly, at the same time, while I had that that cultural touch point, right, into this world, one of the things that we discussed, right, is that because it is so specific in its setting of 1999, right, like you were born in 1999. I didn't arrive until a year later. And so it kind of almost feels like a book that is like obviously relevant to Gen Z and millennial audiences of today. But it felt like something I kept wanting to give to my mom or to my grandma. Like I think they would read it, and down to the specificity of like the intersections of the streets that she's walking past in her high heels or in her pumps. It's there's a real generational gap.
But it's also not like talking down to its audience. It's not going to then try to over-explain. It's kind of like you will get it, and if you don't get it, Google it. It's not up to me to educate you, which I think is a really great choice in it, because it kind of like leaves it up to the audience where if they don't get the references, they've got to put in the work. Totally. She's not going to be putting in the effort to educate people who weren't there for it, because that shouldn't be needed. And
that's across both racial lines and also generation, which I think is so interesting, right? It meant there was a... there are parts of it that I sort of had access into, and then others that I didn't. So that made for a great learning experience. And I think that even if maybe you're not of an age where these references are relevant to you, or you come from a different culture, the vibe is still, you get fantastic. The vibe. You know what I mean? It's still really immersive. So it's not something that is going to alienate readers, but you do have to be willing to not be pandered to, right? Because this book it's for everybody, but it's a love letter to a very specific group of people in a very specific time. And if you're willing to strap in, I think you're in for a wild ride.
A fantastically wild ride.
Yeah.
So let's discuss the sort of like more or less timeliness of this narrative, and the fact that, you know, it's a very, very specific time and era, but a lot of the issues in the book are still incredibly prevalent today. I think, you know, the intersectional feminism, the Me Too of it all, there are so many elements of this that are very current issues in the world. So let's kind of unpack that a bit more.
Let's dish. I'm so curious about your experience of this book, right? But like this felt so familiar to me in how the characters spoke to each other and the obstacles that they were facing. Not just because I'm also Black, but because like so many of these issues are still being debated today.
Yeah.
And I, in conversation with you yesterday, I was saying that like I am a horrible fiction writer. Thank God I've been called to do features and opinions and nonfiction work. But when I had a go when I was 17 at writing a short story for English Extension 2, shout out to the HSC, rest in peace, please. I wrote a short story about being mixed race, being a mixed race journalist in the media world, right? Quite forecasting, I guess, what was going to become my experience. Manifesting accidentally, right? And it's so funny because I look back on that and I cringe, not just because of my like writing abilities, but because it felt so like formulaic and stereotypical. To the point where, and this is a whole other conversation, like some of the people that were helping me work on that piece in order to submit it for like consideration, right, were white. And like they had such an idea of how they thought different beats should go. Like I actually had an experience, and I feel like I literally, like this is a dead horse that I flog all the time, but I just think it was like so crazy to me. When I was writing this short story and getting feedback from like, I guess, white mentors around me, I remember there was one time where my character says to another character, like, you know, thanks sis or whatever. And this person who's giving me feedback at the time was like, hey, just be mindful that like I don't want you to come across as too stereotypical because like of everyone calling each other sis. And I was like, first of all, girl, you can't give me that feedback. Second of all, the character was talking to her sister. I was referring to like her actual little sis.
And even if she wasn't. Jesus
right? Even if
Christ.
she wasn't, the need to police, but also the immediate assumption that it's like,
I'm going to get you another
AAVE.
horse.
Literally. Yeah, literally. Give me more. And that wasn't even the craziest bit of feedback. The other bit of feedback that I got from my teacher at the time, when I was writing about these experiences that felt very true to, I guess, the concerns that I had at the time, right? My teacher, I can see she's a good person in an attempt, I guess, to expand my worldview, gave me a copy of The Underground Railroad by Colton, and so his surname here, which is a book obviously about like slavery and liberation of Black people, she slid the book across the table in the library and she said, Sonny, now this is how you do Black.
Were there jazz hands?
Yeah. Which is the one thing that kind of made it somewhat redeemable, was the campiness of it all. But I just thought that was such a crazy thing to say, because there's this idea, right? One, that I needed to be told by a white person how you do Black, but also more broadly that there's only one way to do Black. And I think that's because like we assume that every non-ethnic perspective is a universal perspective.
Oh yeah,
and
it's a monolith.
It's a monolith, and anything else is a deviation. There's only one way to tell a story. Anyway, that is just, I feel like that I couldn't help but think about that when I read this, right? Because I kind of felt validated that a lot of the things that I was exploring that didn't have to do with slavery or the Underground Railroad were topics that Amy was talking about in her book back in the 90s, based off of her real life experience working in the media industry. Yeah.
And then there were also, like, the interesting thing about this book is there are so many different perspectives. Like, all of the characters have very different point of views and perspectives on all of the very intersectional issues that are within their community, which is a very interesting thing for this person to be like, this is how you do Black. And this book is very evidently being like, here are so many, not all, here are so many different perspectives on Black issues.
Absolutely.
And that is very much the difference between the person who actually has the experience and someone who doesn't.
Exactly.
And some stupid English teacher.
And it also means as well, like when we get to read a book where there is more than one token Black character, you see multiple Black experiences, multiple Black perspectives, right? Yeah. And I'm so curious to see how white audiences will receive, like, you know, we can tell from the setup that when Nikki is the only Black editor at Style List, you can presume the obstacles that she's going to face by virtue of being the only one. But I think it's so interesting that even when we get to what you would assume is Nikki's dream job, spoiler, but working as editor-in-chief at Sugar, which is a predominantly Black magazine, right? She still faces internalized racism. She still comes up against racial bias, colorism, white supremacy, like the way that is embedded. Not
slut shaming?
Slut shaming, the way that is embedded within your own community and then compounded by the intersection of race and class.
And
but also hair, but also like even without the internalization of it within your own communities, the way that when you are one of few women of color, or when you are the rare magazine that speaks to this audience, right, you're still coming up against mainstream institutions that are centered around the white perspective and the white voice. So it's so interesting to see how the protagonist, Nikki, navigates that within the dynamics of her team, right, and their interpersonal politics, but also them as the underdogs going up against other publishing giants. And yet simultaneously, some of the publishing giants that we come up against in this book is both Lucinda from Style List, who is a white woman, but then Lucifer. But then she's also coming up against Barbara, her own publisher, who is a Black woman and not immediately an ally. But then also, as you learn very early on, Alonzo Griffin, right? We see the presence of powerful men of color who weaponize their power against women in this book as well. Yeah. So there's so many interesting representations of power and lack thereof in this book that are just so fascinating and can only come from having more than one person of color depicted in their book.
Because it's so fascinating, the fact that, like, you know, Alonzo, for example, he was a childhood friend of her mother. And she kind of like can't, and even at the end of the day, she actually can't force herself to hate him, because she's like, at the end of the day, he was like one of the two Black kids in the school and was subject to so much racism that he had to harden, that he had to like intentionally harden himself in order to not get beaten down by the world. And so then that kind of like how, you know, the patriarchy and how racism kind of affects men as well was that really interesting part of that. And then even with then Barbara's experience as a queer woman, as a queer Black woman, and how that kind of intersects with her personal experiences. There were so many different elements of that, which I found was such a great part about it, because it didn't demonize anyone, because it gave everyone empathy, even the villains more or less, or like just the not allies of the story.
I struggled with that. With her, I was flicking through the book because I thought, I did actually. His desperation should have made me exultant. Alonzo Griffin, the person who turned me out and then tormented me for years, had hit rock bottom. Instead, I felt an unexpected sadness for my mum's oldest friend. Alonzo was a monster who'd assaulted several women I knew, and he deserved everything that was now coming to him. But my mum had told me too many stories about the the virulent.
Virulent? Wait, how do you spell it?
VIRUL.
Wow, new words, guys. Virulent.
Virulent. Please be kind. Virulent racism and bullying they'd survived growing up, and I'd spent too many nights in this man's arms to rejoice at his downfall. Alonzo was the worst thing that had ever happened to me, but I had no idea who I would be if I hadn't had to evolve and toughen up to deal with him. I thought that was so interesting. I don't want to spend too much time talking on that, but like the inter-community politics, right, of the way in which Black men have at times been complicit in the subjugation of Black women because of the way that they are victims of racism while also perpetrators of toxic masculinity, right, is just so interesting. And like she mentions in absolute passing, Nikki in her college experience, how she got into womanism, which is this expansive version of Black feminism, right, coined by Alice Walker. And in it was very much about how Black women in their struggle for liberation from patriarchy also needed to be joined in union by their Black brothers and partners because it recognized the way that patriarchy also hurt them as well as white supremacy. Anyway, it was just so interesting. She mentions that in passing, but as somebody who's quite interested in womanism, it was really interesting but uncomfortable because that's an ongoing I guess struggle within the Black community, right, is the allegiance that Black men and women feel to each other on the basis of their shared culture, while also recognizing that they can weaponize patriarchy in particularly violent and personal ways against Black women. And so that was just it was just a footnote in this. But interestingly, all of the violent men in this book are Black. And
but do they have any white men in it?
With the exception of MC White, or whatever his name was, no. Yeah, Sophie's boyfriend. But I think that's so interesting because like you could then attempt to say, oh my God, this is like demonizing Black men or saying that all men are violent. That's absolutely not the case. She's working in a very specific industry, right? And she talks about the toxicity. She's intersecting a lot with rap culture and gang violence and then men of power. And yeah, I'm so curious to see. I can imagine there's going to be like an uncomfortable white reader who reads this and it's like, oh my God, these crazy Black men. And it's like, no, men broadly do this everywhere.
Yeah. Like I'm like, yeah, sure, men in this can be horrible, but like men in every element of the world are horrible.
Exactly.
Like it's not just it's not a reflection on the Black community, not in any which way. It's actually just a reflection of men.
Yes.
Full stop.
Especially considering that in novels, maybe I'm like feeling like protective, but it's almost, and that's not at all to excuse people who do harm just because they are also harmed themselves, right? But it's just that it's that interesting thing where because this has such mainstream appeal, but it is so specific in its portrayal of the Black community or of different Black communities, because again, they're not monolithic, right? People might make it out to be sort of like full statements on these people versus like when you read any other novel, right, that's not seen as like a Black book or an Asian book that is just seen as a universal experience. It's just seen as literature, right? Like we broadly don't see the actions of those characters as being like against or for white people. We don't see them as a reflection of their race. You know what I mean? Like they're just people. Their race has nothing to do with it. So I'm very curious to see the reception from mainstream audiences of this because it's like it deals with race and so many other intersections. But in the same way, like I think that characters of color should be allowed to explore the full spectrum of humanity, good and bad, without it being a statement on the entire community in the same way that communities who aren't of color have been able to do since millennium. Yeah.
Beautiful point. That actually just reminds me of like so different, but like the Emily Henry line which says not everything that a woman does is a grand indictment on other women.
Yes.
Which is one of our favorite lines from what book lovers, I believe. And so that kind of.
And there's also a lot of commentary about that in Beach Read, right?
Yeah.
About how immediately because a story is penned from a woman's perspective, featuring a woman, written by a woman, it's like women's literature. Instead of just being like literature, because the only people that have like authority over mainstream canon are white men. You know what I mean? Yeah. So yeah, I love reading books that deviate from that.
Definitely. But the interesting thing for me is when because I love to see like what the general vibe is online, what people are kind of saying about this. This book has about like 1,000 good star ratings, like not many.
Doesn't what, sorry?
1,000 ratings on Goodreads, sorry. Oh my God. This book has like 1,000 ratings on Goodreads, which is not many, especially considering the book's been out for like over a month at this point. It's getting a lot more press every day. But then when I went on TikTok, I saw countless Black booktokers talking about it. I think I saw maybe 2 people who were white talking about the book, which I think is a very interesting thing about how this book, I don't think is being...
I think it will probably make some white people uncomfortable, or they'll feel that it's like not for them because it is so specific in its references. But it's the same way that when we go to, like, when we're in school and we've got required reading, like we're all required to read Catcher in the Rye and to project ourselves onto Holden Caulfield, you know what I mean? Like we are taught that like white men are deserving of our like relatability and our empathy and our time and curiosity, but not women or women of color. So I'm so curious to see, like, this has such broad appeal, but it's not trying to pander to any other audience. No. So I'm curious to see if those ratings and the demographic who are relating to this book change as it's been out for longer.
And also change as it becomes a TV show.
Becomes a TV show.
I'm certain it will.
100%.
I actually have this weird feeling with this, a similar feeling that I have with Heated Rivalry, where I think this is actually going to be a very big show. I think this is going to spark a lot of discourse. I think because it'll probably come out in maybe a year and a half because it only just got announced. I say in a year and a half, 2 years, I just have this feeling that this book is going to really hit a cultural movement in a couple of years' time, and that it is going to people when they hear it, they're not going to think of a book, they're going to think of the TV show.
Yes,
and it's people are going to be like, oh, there was a book. Because it has that promise and that appeal and that sort of like it has that magic to it that I just know it's going to really ruffle some white feathers.
It is going to rule the world. Talking about ruffling some feathers, let's do a deep dive on Miss Nikki Rose.
I mean, yesterday when we were talking about you reading it, and you were like, I just want to shake her.
I want to throttle her.
With
she
love.
would be a very difficult person to be friends with, which is so interesting because she has such good friends in this book.
Love her friends.
Like incredible friends, thank God. And I think that's the only way she becomes redeemable is because she's got good people around her.
Who hold her accountable. I really respect. I love that even like when Sophie came to see her, she was not going soft on her in a way, which like, yeah, you did just realize you got raped. Horrible. I have so much empathy for you. But she also wasn't letting her excuse that and use that as an excuse for her very deplorable actions.
Yeah,
and the way
she was
treating
like,
her friends.
I will forgive you and I'm here for you always, but you did let me down. And I was like, that is powerful. I need to borrow that line. Nikki just makes, and obviously if you've read this book or are going to read this book, like there is quite candid depiction of sexual assault, but also more broadly about rape culture.
Yeah.
It's really interesting because I'm thrown back to one of our prior Book Smart conversations about Jeanette McCurdy and her half his age protagonist being an imperfect victim, right? And Nikki is an imperfect victim because she's consistently putting herself in situations where the reader and even other people in the story are going, girl, there's only one way this is going to end. And so
she's
like, she's like, like she just can be so I don't even think it's naive, to be honest. And again, that's not at all to justify what happens to her. But I think it's just that she is so lust driven.
I mean, yeah, you were saying yesterday when she was when you were reading the chapter about her talking with like the
she was with
rapist.
This was when she literally was interviewing a man accused of rape who she was very confident was genuinely a rapist. And she was, I think I tabbed it because I was like, girl, calm down. Yes, I was like, are you in perpetual ovulation?
She said that she wanted to lick his head.
Yeah, she literally
It's about 150, I think. 250, sorry.
Crazy that you know that.
Because that was where you were up to yesterday.
That's so true.
Because I was with you when you read this page.
She also just talks about how she's attracted to dominance tinged with ruthlessness, spinning me in concentric circles.
Which
that got smaller as I neared a perilous center. And this is the thing, she's aware of his game. She's aware of the way that he is literally trying to seduce her and take her back to his hotel room while they're meant to be conducting a professional interview, while there are other people in the room. And yet she's still thinking like, oh, I want to lick his head. I was like, oh my God, girl.
I know. She's like, oh yeah, I'm sure he has a gun on him. And he also then put,
but I'm sure he's also packing. That's basically
that's
her.
Kind of almost, that was honestly the dialogue. That's a chapter pretty much.
She falls for the same men over and over again. And I also am of the firm belief that this woman needs to be single. I have problems with the ending of the book.
Okay, let's get into that because, yeah, it had been how many months by the time they get together? It had been like, what, a year? 8 months?
No, it was like...
No, it was 8 months, I think, in between her finishing up at Style. Finishing up at
It was
not
8
Style.
months from finishing at Style, but from
not
like...
Style, not Style.
Sugar. But the epilogue... Yeah, it had been 8 months since she stepped foot in the New Voices offices. But at that point, I think we're led to believe maybe she had been with Derek for 6 months or so.
Yeah, okay. And so I think in the interim time, it was probably like 8 months.
She had a lot of work to do on herself.
She has so much, and I get it. Derek sounds great.
I'd fall for him too.
Totally would fall for Derek, but it's like, baby, you really do need to.
She's very reliant on other people. Interestingly, it's funny because like all of these men that she meets, the majority of them are toxic. But I was like, damn, how are you? I guess it's because all of the men that she meets are rich, right? Through varying ways and
powerful.
But like they are like sending cleaners to her home, meals, like they're very much providers. I think she's so just like lured in by immediately like being taken care of or immediately things turning sexual, and it clouds her judgment a lot.
Yeah, even with her friendships, like it actually really does affect and impact every element of her lives. And as someone who I'm very harsh on, I'm going to really out myself here as an asexual girly. I'm like very judgmental of my friends when they let themselves get stigmatized, pretty much. When they let themselves get distracted or like kind of ruin relationships because of men. I am so hypercritical of that because I'm like, that's stupid. I've never gone through it, so I'm like, that's dumb. Why would you do that? And like I have very little empathy for that, and I'm very aware of that. We love to talk about things I think about, like therapy things on the pod. But
tests your empathy.
That really did test my empathy, and I think, I almost feel like I had more empathy for her at times than I have my friends, because I'm like, I was like, I see the full picture. You are a victim of so many different things. You are a victim of sexual assault and this like really horrifically racist industry. Like I really have so much empathy for what you're going through. But at the same time, I'm like, not everything is about getting fucked.
Yeah.
And you've kind of got to at a certain point, like actually not be stupid.
And saying that, she did have incredible drive and discipline. I was almost not buying the times in which she would, like the time periods she would like turn over like extensive proposals and pitches and like the way she was just basically like one pep talk away from like being a boss in the room. Like I could definitely see why she'd feel she had imposter syndrome, because there was even points as a reader where I wasn't sure I believed in her or her judgment.
Whereas I feel like I really did. I was like, yeah, you know what? Like everyone has like a little hyperfixation moment where they really need to get everything done and they can really embody that. And she had that drive and that vision. I think it was mostly because I don't think she was thinking about as much of like a larger big picture of it. She was just focusing on the task at hand. In those moments, and was very much like goal oriented and finishing that and being like, okay, let's finish that, let's make that good. And that's kind of how she was getting through it. But
what I did love is that she was driven by a real love of the sugar audience. And
that
you see that in Nikki's notes, and like that I think is what separated her, because I think her judgment at times was questionable. Other times it was great. I mean, she took great risks financially for the magazine, personally and professionally, by trying to be on the right side of history and to stick by her guns in an industry that requires you to often compromise.
Well, I want to know how that kind of like how her experience kind of reflects your own in this kind of industry, as it is still, media industry is still fucking wide as hell.
I mean, I've never been in a position quite like hers, and I like, it's funny because there were similarities, I think, in terms of the messages that she receives and the messages that I have internalized or received. But I also operate with such a degree of privilege. And, it's funny because like to give people a snapshot, right? Like she is identifiably Black. There's no real ambiguity, right? This character, she describes her sort of caramel skin. She has beautiful curls, but of course she often wears them in weaves and whatnot.
The politics of hair was
that's so real. I can speak about that till the cows come home.
Yeah, and I also think that, as someone not Black, I think that it's very interesting because like that's not something that's like a new concept to me. We've spoken about this, because like I feel like very much something that educated me a lot, and that was the play, It's 7 Methods of Killing Kylie Jenner. Fantastic play.
Incredible.
Can I have another season, please?
Yeah, that was truly amazing.
But I feel like that play said a lot about that, and so that was a very educational moment for me where I learned a lot. And then similarly, I feel like this book could have that sort of moment for a lot of other people who are not Black and who aren't aware of that sort of same experience, because it is something that's never necessarily over-explained or being like, so here is the gist, but it's something that is so prevalent as a theme throughout the book that I find.
I think people who might say like, oh, it's not that deep, like if they saw the extent to which hair is a conversation, and is, it's that's a whole other essay. But I think, it's just funny because like, she is biracial, but she takes more after her mother, who is Black. I take after my mother definitely in features, but in complexion, I take after my dad. And so like, it was so funny that we have had similar experiences, but never have I been to such an exposed to such extreme racism or misogyny as she has. And I definitely related to some of the conversations about like, when do you compromise? Because it is hard when you are the only one and you're doing the best with the access you're afforded, and you're always wanting to, you're mindful of, I've got a seat at the table, but the whole idea here is that I've got to hold the door open for people behind me. How do you do that while keeping your seat? You know what I mean? So I really sympathize with her journey on a much bigger scale with much more at stake than I navigate, but it was really fascinating. Not a perfect read though. I will say maybe because some of the lessons or the like things that might be super like interesting or brand new to non-Black readers were so familiar to me. It didn't offer me a whole lot that was different or new, which it didn't need to reinvent the wheel. But I felt that it got a little bit repetitive towards the end. And I also just like, it's funny because it seems a little bit fantastical in parts of how there was always a rich person able to save the day, particularly towards the end. Everything got sorted very quickly. But I acknowledge that Amy is writing from her real lived experience in that industry. So I imagine when you are connected like that, things do come into play that are otherwise unimaginable. But I thought it was really entertaining and evocative. I'm going to be so sat for the show.
Well, what is your rating going to be?
3.5 out of 5.
3.5.
It was well written. It was compelling. And I enjoyed it and I had fun with it. It didn't reinvent the mold. I actually would be really interesting to see a book of essays or a memoir from Amy. Maybe she's already released that, but I'm so interested in her as a person.
She has good stuff on TikTok. I will say that.
Yeah, she's sick and I can't wait for the show. How about you?
I feel like I would give this either a 4 or 4.5. Probably 4.5, honestly. And I feel like that's also because I just know how good the TV show is going to be. So I'm just more I'm even more amped for that. But I just found it so engaging. I really couldn't put it down. You know when you like go to the beach with friends and you all bring a book and you're like, I'm going to read this. And you don't because you just talk the whole time. No, I enforced us all to actually read because I wanted to read this. And I read like a good 50 pages at the beach while I was with my friends, which is very impressive because they were yapping at times. And I was like, no. Nikki's just realized that she actually was assaulted.
Well, this is how well loved my copy is that the blue metallic-y stuff has actually come off, which is really sad because it's a beautiful cover.
Heartbreaking. And also I'm a slut for a book with an ensemble cast. You love a bit more solo.
Or just solo, smaller. I had the criticism that it felt like every 4 chapters there was a new character being introduced.
But I love that. I want it to feel like a real world. I hate it when, my only complaint with One Golden Summer, which I literally just finished reading, is that Alice mentions having friends. And I'm like, babe, we've only ever heard about your family and that's it. You don't have friends. I'm like, I don't believe this. You never thought about them once in that whole book. I love a big world.
I kind of felt like the reason why there were so many characters in this book particularly, or like not obviously there needed to be a lot of characters, but we spend a lot of time introducing new characters. I reckon it's because they are homages to people that Amy actually knew. And so I wonder, like, for people at the time, it probably served more as like a shout out to them versus like actually
hint, wink, wink, nudge, nudge kind of vibe.
Yeah, versus like actually being necessary that we had 3 sentences on this new person that was employed kind of thing.
On that note, have a beautiful rest of your day, divas.
Happy reading.
Bye, friends.